everybody, and this is Chaos with Chaos Esports Productions, bringing you another tutorial on an application that I use to record all of my wonderful games with. Today we are looking at Dxtory. Now, currently out there are two applications that are primarily used for recording video games. Ooh, hello. Color scheme has changed. Awesome. There is Dxtory and Fraps. Both of them, Dxtory costs around $40, and I believe Fraps costs around, I think it's $30. I'll have to check that and put the links in the descriptions. But anyways, so today we're going to be looking at Dxtory because this is the program that I opted to go out and get. I found a whole bunch of tutorials online as far as, you know, how to use the software at their homepage, and it's pretty good. A lot of it's written though, so in case you're, you know, not an avid reader, it can be quite dull and boring. But anyways, so we're going to go ahead and get right into this. So basically the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to kind of, all the settings are in these small little tabs, so we're going to walk through each tab that I find useful, and we'll go from there. So this first tab is basically just setting up where things are located. When you go in-game, you'll notice at wherever you pick, you'll get a number up in the, for me it's the upper left hand corner, and that basically just shows you how many frames are flashing across your screen at the time. You're not necessarily recording, it's just giving you an indicator of, hey, your screen is refreshing at this rate. Now, most people probably won't actually physically see that because the eye processes images at around 23 frames per second, so you can't really tell anything higher than that, although you can make subtle differences between like a 30 frames per second rate and a 60 frames per second rate in terms of like fluidity of things moving on the screen and things like that. So I just go ahead and keep all of these things checkmarked because I like seeing, okay, here's what my video is physically at. The right file FPS is basically whenever you're recording, it's right next to your video frames per second. It'll show you what you are writing, what frame rate you are writing at. For me, I generally try and write at 60 frames per second, although sometimes depending on what's going on screen, whether it be there's a big battle happening and things like that, you'll drop frames. So it all depends on kind of your own processor and video card and how things are going to, like what kind of quality you'll get as far as that goes. So, and then basically these two colors, this basically means, the first one means that when you are not recording, the number up wherever you designate it will show as, for me, green, and then when I'm recording it'll be this orangish yellow shade. So that's pretty much all I have here. Nothing too fancy. The next tab is the folders tab. This is actually where you designate where you are writing to. Now, most people will designate their physical hard drive, whatever their main C drive is. For me, I'll give you a little preview. For me, if I were to record to my C drive, and let's just throw it on my desktop just quickly here. Desktop. Hit OK. You'll see that this new location showed up. Now, whichever one is the top location is the one that it will actually physically write to. Now, you'll notice that it showed up as 0 megabytes per second. Basically, what you want to do is you want to click on this and basically just give it the standard's fine, 1000 megabytes, and just click run. And it'll basically show you, hey, I can write at 57 megabytes per second on my main drive. Now, for me, that isn't nearly as, that's not enough in order to get the quality that I want. So I went out and I actually play all of my games, even though I'm on the Windows side, I play on a Mac, so Mac has the wonderful Thunderbolt technology, and that can get up to 10 gigabits per second worth of transfer rate. So that's why, if you look, my transfer rate for, now, gigabits per second and physical megabytes per second aren't like, they're not one-to-one, so 1 gigabyte per second versus 1 gigabit per second is not exactly the same. That's why there's a discrepancy here. But basically, you just set up whatever folder you want to save to on this screen. That's more or less all I really have to say. Now, I do want to make one quick comment. Generally speaking, if this is not above 80 megabytes per second, I would say 80 to 90 megabytes per second, you're probably going to want a faster hard drive to write to, because some of the files, like when you physically record 720p, the files actually get really, really large, so it's kind of difficult for your hard drive to process all of the data in sync with your recording, and that's kind of what leads to dropping frames. So we'll go ahead and remove that. Next is the hotkey settings. This is where you set up what you want your hotkeys to be. I just use, for the movie, I just use F12. It's easy to remember. It's right next to the print screen, and then whenever I get into game, I can click it. You can also set up hotkeys for screenshots and things like that. Fairly straightforward. I'll let you guys play around with it to figure it out. And now we're going to get into kind of a little bit more of the technical side. So what this is all of the movie settings. Now, there are a couple key things. Obviously, you've got your frame rate. This is what you're physically going to record at. Now, depending on your processor and your graphics card and things like that, this, you gotta kind of tweak this to what your computer can handle. I've got an i7. I think I've got 8 gig of RAM and a pretty nice graphics card, so going at 60 frames a second isn't really the end of the world for me. So you'll have to play with those settings based on your own computer and what you've got. File output. Now, there are two options. You can do a file output or a direct show output. Direct show output basically allows you to have if you run Open Broadcaster software or XSplit, things like that, it basically gives you an option in those applications to pull, like, it's kind of like a second medium, or like, think of it as like a video camera that you would have attached to your computer. It's basically just an input that it creates. So for me, since like I've got my StarCraft profile, if I were to click that, I could go into Open Broadcaster software and physically set that up as a source. Generally speaking, I don't ever use this, because why use kind of like a third application in order to get the data from your screen to Open Broadcaster software or XSplit? I haven't found a use for it, so I just generally keep this turned off. Now, file format's fairly straightforward. You've got the raw cap and AVI. Most people record into AVI because that's more or less directly, you can take anything that you make, any videos that you make, you can just throw them up onto YouTube. Now, generally speaking, both file types are fairly large based on whatever resolution you pick, so just be aware. The raw cap can't be read by, I don't think, any program, but these buttons down here, this little pink boxes button basically allows you to convert it from a raw cap file to an AVI file. So just depends on like what you think of the quality of the AVI output versus the raw cap. So things to play with. The video codec. Now, I did a lot of research online as far as which codec to use. It comes with a whole bunch of codecs already built in. After lots of research online, this Lagarith lossless codec actually seems to be the best quality. So if you just Google that codec, you can actually download it for free. It's no big deal. It's fairly straightforward. And I think that's all I really have to say about that. Clipping, I generally keep this all down to 0 because I take my whole screen, no big deal. And then margin, I don't really build in any margin, so I just leave it as is. Basically what that'll do is if you add margin, it won't record, I think it's in pixels from whatever dimension that you're at. Now we get to scaling. So scaling is basically just what resolution do you want to record at. I generally do 720p, so you've got 1280 by 720. If you want to do 1080, I think it's like 1960 or something like that. Anyways, basically this just allows you to set up whatever resolution you want to do, and that is that. Obviously, depending on your resolution, depends on how big your file size is going to be, as well as how many frames you can physically, capture, depending on processor and video cards and things like that. So that's it for the video settings, and we'll go ahead and get into the audio settings. Now, here is what I really love about Dxtory. So Dxtory allows you to input multiple audio channels, which is really useful because you can set up like for me, I can set up my voice and my speakers as a separate audio channel. So when I take my videos into Movie Studio, which is one of the video editing softwares that I use, it allows you to look at, like, you can physically, it breaks up each of those audio channels. So if for some odd reason you say something that you think is stupid, but you don't want to cut out the background noise, you can just mute the spoken words channel, the microphone channel. Wow, I can talk. And basically it just allows you to have that flexibility of making things more emphasized and so on and so forth. And you can pretty much add as many channels as you want. I haven't played around. Oh, it says maximum of 8. So you can have 8 audio channels, which is kind of nice. And then you can also pick what type of channel depending on what kind of recording device you have. For me, it's just the standard PCM 16-bit stereo. This next tab is just screenshots. Basically what this does is you can set this up, like I said back on the hotkeys, you can set it up to do screenshots. It's fairly straightforward. Scaling basically just tells you how big you want it compared to your monitor size. I really don't use the screenshot function too terribly often, and quite frankly, print screen works just fine for me. So, next tab is the advanced settings. Now, you can play around with this, and I mean, you really kind of have to just go with your gut feel. Obviously, depending on what you pick, depends on what kind of extra work it puts on your CPU. So just play around with it. I wouldn't go to any extremes. I would start low and kind of build. Like, you can choose for multiple thread, processing threads. This basically means your CPU will do a little bit more work to encode it a little bit faster. And you can set that up for however many cores you've got. So let's see, enable multi-GPU fix code. Yeah, I really don't use many of these, but feel free if you've got any questions. I can do some Googling and look up and see what exactly it does. I haven't seen anybody play around with these or give any specifications that one of these is better than the other. Just personally, this is set as 1 as a default. I use 2 threads just to speed up. It doesn't really do much to my computer, and it makes things a little bit better. So, and yeah, I think that's it for Dxtory. Now, if you go to Dxtory's website, I think if I remember right, the guy is a Japanese guy. So check him out. Like I said, it's a fairly, for what kind of power it does, I think it's worth its price. It's $40. Well, 3,990 yen. So roughly $40. So yeah, I mean, so I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you've got any questions, feel free to tweet me at Twitter. I'll leave that in the description, as well as if you want to see me stream any of my games live, feel free to follow me on Twitch and all the other social media stuff. So yeah, like I said, if you've got any questions, feel free to either leave a comment, send me a tweet, anything like that, and I will see you guys later.